Hello, this is Lizzie, and I'm going to be talking about queer characters in anime today. So, I've been an anime fan, enthusiast, obsessive for at least 25 odd years now. Absolutely adore the genre. I even went to university to study Southeast Asian film, specialising in Japanese cinema, where I looked at Japan's obscure porn industry. And then I did a master's in contemporary film developments, and then I did another master's in Japanese culture, and I specialised in the creative industries, and I did my dissertation looking at regendered male bodies in anime. So I got a bit of a background in that, but it's always just because I've been really, really, really obsessed with the stuff. I love the stuff. I find it fascinating. I find it really beautiful. I started back in the early days of basically just being a fan of yaoi and shonenai. Some of my earliest ones were things like I Know Kasabi, Kazuki no Uta, Gaku in Heaven, Yamine Matsue, all these kind of beautiful, beautiful shows that featured really interesting storytelling. And like many girls at the time, we weren't quite open to admitting that we found male on male just as attractive as men found women on women. And it was a genre of porn that I could really indulge in and enjoy, and I really loved it. Unfortunately, as I got older, I kind of wanted my yaoi and shonenai to reflect my older tastes, and as well as me being much older than the protagonists. By the time you get into 30s, you were kind of a bit done with school dramas and cute little innocent looking boys that you think, oh, these boys are too young for me to look at. I want something older. I want some, like, bigger plot lines. I want some of the stuff that I used to see in things like I Know Kasabi. I wanted meatier and dirtier yaois with older protagonists. And, there are some great titles out there. Most of the time, I got my pleasure from shipping series rather than I actually did watching yaoi. I've got so many ships. It's insane. I've now got an entire website I have devoted to creating basically a database of as many animes that I male ship, so which is Lizzie Ships Anime, if you want to go check it out. As I started noticing that the yaoi content was decreasing, and the last anime that was made that actually had sex between two males was 2012, and my shonen ai shows were getting a little bit samey, a little bit like the normal cliches of high school love over and over again, kind of a bit bland, and a little bit questionable. With the rise of things like super lovers, which I just see as child grooming, and things like Hitorijima, which are just bland, and as someone who works in a school, I kind of can't condone the student-teacher relationship. It's just not my aesthetic. I am excited to see Banana Fish. I remember the manga from back in the 80s, but only barely. But I want to make sure the show is over before I watch it, so that I can binge watch it in one beautiful swing and, yeah, really, really indulge it. I did discover some great titles that from the manga industry that I never expect to even look at. My favourite being MW, which is by Osamu Tezuka, who obviously is the godfather of anime, and he's the guy who gave us things like Astro Boy and Kimba the White Lion Cub and Blackjack. So I never really expected him to write something as heavy as MW, which is amazing because it's a manga that tackles social problems and domestic terrorism, chemical weapons, and in amongst all this very interesting relationship between a man who feels like he sinned in his youth by acting on his feelings for another boy he was with and became a priest, and then he's reunited with this boy who is so disillusioned and so warped by an awful thing that happened in his past that he's become a terrorist. And the two of them have this on and off again relationship where they kind of know it's wrong, but they kind of still like love and are very attracted to each other, but there's also the bigger picture going on, and it was really good. It was a relationship between two men in a time when that was, this is 1970s Japan. This was not quite a thing that you talked about openly, and it also dealt with the problems that were going on in Japanese society, such as the involvement with the Vietnamese wars and chemical weapons. And it was everything I wanted, meaty plot, adult characters, an actual portrayal of a gay relationship, which since then hasn't been as much stuff that really tackles all of that in one place. I was like, oh my goodness, was the 70s just more progressive than what's going on in the anime industry now? It's really bizarre, and I always wanted to keep on learning so I can kind of answer some of these questions. So I started thinking about the appeal of non-yaoi anime and manga and the type of characters that I was drawn to. and noticed the various ways non-binary and LGBT characters were being represented. Now, back in the 90s, and as a big fan of the lost decade period of Japanese anime and history, I was really obsessed with cyberpunk and things like Cybercito 808, which had Benton, beautiful Benton, who looks like David Bowie. So obviously, young 16-year-old me was totally enamoured by this guy that looked like David Bowie and got long hair, wears lipstick, and fights a vampire in a cyberpunk future. And then there were characters like Count D from Pet Shop of Horrors, which was a wonderful horror social commentary on problems in Japan, but also mixed in this slightly queer-coded relationship between him and the detective that's investigating the murders, and they all seem to be linked by someone who's bought a pet in this mysterious pet shop. And some of these things were just so much more appealing to me, because it's not saying that these characters are queer, it's not saying there's gay relationships, but I got more of a reading on these characters. There's something queer coding going on. I started noticing this more and more, and I loved it. And then I started researching the way the male body was represented in anime. I'd admit a lot of my focus is more on alternate genders performed by a male of biological sex. I do watch Shoujo Ai and Yuri, and I have done a little bit of reading around that, but I'm more fascinated about the way the male body has been recoded. And a lot of the times, this newly coded biologically male character that a lot of time is often referred to as male seems to be in shonen manga and seems to be created for the enjoyment of male viewers rather than female viewers. It just kind of blew my mind. I noticed that if you took out your traditional forms of masculine and mainstream versions of males, you kind of were left with about 3 archetypes of LGBTQI and non-binary characters. This was the new half, the super feminine, and the crossdresser. I also discovered genres like futanari, which, unless you want to go down a rabbit hole of a really bizarre form of hentai, don't Google it, but it's essentially, futanari is quite young looking character designs, but they bodies that have both boobs and a penis. And it's a form of hentai generally enjoyed by males, which is bizarre but also fascinating. I was also hoping to try and find some representation of queer characters outside the stereotype of the Okama, which is a slang word for male homosexuals, and they don't normally donate feminine gays. Basically has been adopted by the drag community. So the Okama is normally kind of, you can tell it's male, looks quite masculine, but at the same time wears lipstick, codes their language and body language, and it's quite stereotypical, often quite jokey, but it goes along with the fact that in Japanese media, especially the entertainment industry, they have a lot of reality TV shows and panel shows where they normally feature someone like the Okama as an entertainment, basically in television in Japan. If you are doing it for the cameras and you're in the entertainment industry, it's okay to be gay, it's okay to be queer-coded, it's okay to cross-dress because it's all for entertainment purposes rather than that's what you do in your real life. So first I want to start looking at these archetypes I was discussing. I'm going to start off with the new half. So the new half is a term for a male that is transitioning or transitioned into a female. It's characters like Mariandel from Ixion Saga, DT. So predominantly it's used as a form of comic relief and the running joke of confusing the male protagonists. This is the genre that turned into hentai known as futanari. While not the most positive of kind of views, it does say that these characters are transitioning. They were originally male, and through whatever story, they have decided to change their sex into that of a woman. Now, there are less positive and more positive characters. Momo from Shangri-La is basically that traditional, looks very much like a woman, but has a male voice and is forever coming on to other male characters to make them feel uncomfortable. And it's more comic relief and more to make others feel uncomfortable, as opposed to someone like Hannah from Tokyo Godfathers. She was rejected from her home because of the choices she made, which is why she lives on the streets, but she made her own kind of family out of other people in the gay scene, and is just a really beautiful and kind person, and she's just a lovely character. So depending on who is dealing with the subject matter, it depends if the new half gets a good representation, or if it's in the case of basically she turns up very much in shonen animes as a bit of a point of humour. She's in gag animes a lot as a bit of a joke, which is unfortunate. So this is what I'm terming the super feminine, and I'm using it for the characters where all their coding, from the shape of their eyes, their hairstyles, their body language and their speech patterns, imply they are female characters. They're biologically female, but they are in fact male. Normally appearing again in shonen animes, generally in like kind of comedies, slice of life rom-coms, kind of sci-fi fantasy shows. Characters such as Hatsura from Crawling with Love, again very much looking, acting, coded as if this character is female, to the point where even the male character kind of like blushes and interacts with them as if they were a female character, and it's very hard to really tell if this character is male at all. And then you've got people like Anagram from Fibrain, who just looks so female and dresses female and acts female, but then he will state, "No, I'm a boy." And so the other character's like, "Oh my goodness, I never knew that. Oh, shock." And then they will just kind of continue as if it doesn't make a blind bit of difference, which is one of the things I do quite like about the super feminine. Once they kind of get over the shock that it's a boy and not a girl, everyone's just like, sure, whatever, you can do that however you like. And they just kind of accept that that's how this particular character wants to dress and look and act, and it's never really mentioned again. And they're treated like as if totally fine to code and act that way, which, yeah, I quite like. Another characters that I quite like is in shows like Get Backers, where it's so obviously like it's a shonen battle anime, you know, things like Yu Yu Hakusho and Bleach. And then you've got characters like Kazuki, who spends a lot of the time being really confused why anyone thinks he's a girl, even though he's incredibly feminine, and gets mistaken for a girl and puts in like dresses, even though he's like, wait a minute, I don't understand, why are you making me cross dress, I'm a boy. But at the same time has that really very close relationship with Jubei, which leads me to believe that that's definitely a queer-coded relationship, because you never see them with any other characters that are interested in them sexually, apart from a female character that cross-dresses as a boy who likes Kazuki but knows that she's not going to get anywhere with him because of Jubei, and another male character that seems to be totally in love with Kazuki. But Jubei only really has eyes for Kazuki, and all the art and the promotional material just really looks like we're meant to believe that they are a couple. And it's one of my favourite ships, so I quite adore that one. So here we get the cross-dressing, and you have them across the board in both shonen and shoujo. Normally done if it's by a female character to escape the prejudice towards women so they can achieve goals and ambitions not normally pursued by females. In males, it can be because they are gay, they are hiding out, but it's often because they simply like to cross-dress, and it has nothing to do with sexuality. Japanese culture is steeped in cross-dressing, from the onogata of kabuki genre to the all-female troupes of takarazuka. And there is a big industry for straight males who want to wear women's clothes, not just in the form of crossplay, but in companies that make bras for males. This is a bizarre trend in Japan for straight male cross-dressing and wearing bras, because basically Japanese men feel that they're so stressed out by the daily grind and their salarymen lifestyles of 72 hours and the pressure of company life, and they need to escape this. And so what they do is they go to the cross-dressing bars, they go somewhere, they get done up like a girl, and they can hang out in the bar and feel liberated from their male workload. They can go to these shops where they can buy bras, and they can put it on, and they can feel transcended from their everyday male roles, and it makes them feel very relaxed. You can see a bit of this in Jonathan Ross's documentary Japanorama, where he went to one of these bra fittings for males who want to escape being male, to escape the pressure of Japanese society. And it's always really bizarre. But it's also where this trope of characters who cross-dress in anime, someone goes, oh my goodness, you cross-dress, you must be gay. And they go, no, it's not because I'm gay. They're not gay. And it's like Lin from Tonkatsu Ramen, who's flat out states, I don't do it because I'm gay, I just like to wear these clothes. It's as simple as that. And this is where you get interesting cases like Gatchaman crowds. I adore Gatchaman crowds for all its social commentary, and I love Rui Rui. And when people started going, oh my goodness, Rui Rui is obviously like non-binary, they're maybe queer-coded, and the writers of the show and the producers stated, no, he's just a nice straight boy who likes pretty things. There's nothing gay, there's nothing queer-coded about him. But people are like, No, he obviously must be coded queer because of the way he cross-dresses. And they're like, no, he's just a boy who likes pretty things. And it's just an exception in Japan that you can be a boy and just like pretty things, which is fair enough, but you can show that in ways that aren't quite so I must cross-dress to be seen in public because I want to keep my male identity hidden and I'm more comfortable as my female persona. It's so crying out to be like a queer represented character, especially when Gatchaman Crowds has so many characters that I feel are coded queer. You've got characters like Odd, who, again, because he works in the entertainment industry and is on one of these panel shows, it's okay to be queer coded because you're for entertainment. But then they've got other characters that you're like, are you male or are you female? And it turns out that pretty much all of the time they are male. It's like, why have such feminine designs for characters and it be nothing about gender? It's one of the headsets, one of those things that along the lines I would love to research it more and find out because A, it fascinates me, and B, I love these type of characters. Now, there are a couple of examples that are hard to place between these archetypes. You get things like characters that you don't quite know what their gender or biological sex could be because they have both female and male genitalia and don't quite fall into the new half because they appear in genres that just are as they've not transitioned. It's always implied that they are born or created this way. These are kind of more the hermaphrodite and the intersex characters. So people like Satan from Devilman, who in his human form is a boy, but when he transcends to Satan, Satan has both breasts and a penis. Koensan Bontatsu from Sayuki, Gensoman and Sayuki. In the anime, it's not really ever stated, but in the manga it is, and it's because it's based on a deity that could be male or could be female, could be both. Because of the transitional nature of this deity, they decided to code the character as completely hermaphrodite. And then you've got characters like Chimera, which is from a yaoi manga, and Chimera has no boobs, is implied that doesn't really have male parts or does have male parts because he can have sex, but by the end of the anime is pregnant, so it also has like female reproductive organs as well. So bizarrely coded, but at the same time, quite interesting. And I again would like to know quite where Japan stands on intersexed individuals. Recent years, I started noticing completely new non-binary character types starting to emerge. Now, there's always been the idea of no gender explored in titles like Clamp. They have always had their completely genderless characters. You see this in animes and mangas like Wish, even Cardcaptor Sakura. It's basically stated in the kind of the Clamp meta in their universe that angels are genderless. Demons are male, but angels are completely genderless, with the exception of Ashura from R.G. Vader, who is again completely meant to be genderless. It's stated in the manga that they are genderless. And these genderless characters, whenever the mangas come over here, they always pronoun them as she, but really they normally should be referred to as kind of they or them or by their name. What's interesting about all these genderless angels is pretty much every time one of these characters is introduced, they always get a male love interest. So Ashura has Yasha. I can't remember the names of the male demon or the human love interest in Wish. It's been a while since I have read those mangas. But again, it's that thing of they look like effeminate men. They don't have boobs. And through the magic of animation, it's always totally clean for their lower halves, but they are implied that this is nothing sexual about the nature. But then that's what Clamp's like. It's always been love kind of about the sex part. It's always about exploring different forms of love, right down from kind of innocent love to romantic love to love between siblings to love that transcends various boundaries. So it's always very beautiful and not quite as sexual as some other shows. It's just interesting that there are these wonderfully non-gendered characters that exist so that we can explore our feelings of love and relationships without sex. But then recently there have been 2 titles that have stood out to me for featuring non-binary characters, and this is the amazing Hoseki no Kuni and the amazing Maiden Abyss. Now, both of these feature characters that, when looking at them, could either be pretty boys or girls. Hoseki no Kuni particularly. Characters are all flat-chested, they wear gender-neutral clothes, no one uses gender pronouns with them. They're they, them, or they use their name, and the only time they ever have like gendered conversation is they refer to each other as brothers, but in that kind of like brothers in arms, because of the nature of the show in which they pair off as individuals to fight this invasion from these Lunarians that have come to the Earth to capture these characters. And basically these characters are gems, and the Lunarians want to capture them, smush them up and turn them into jewelry, so they're fighting for their lives. But there are no gendered pronouns, and what's beautiful about Hoseki no Kuni is once you take out all ideas of gender and biological sex, because these characters are not biological, they're gems. They are made of gemstones. They are geological rather than biological. It just concentrates then on the storyline, the world it's creating, the bonds between these characters, and also it's just a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous series, and one of the few series that when I watch, I don't mind that it's got that CG animation because I'm really invested in the world, and the manga is lovely. And then if you look at Maiden Abyss, in particular a character called Nanachi. Nanachi is one of the mutant creatures, but from the voice and the visuals, you do not know if they are male or female, and no one ever uses a gendered pronoun with this character, so it's completely up to reading whether or not they're male or female. And it's just really nice that they are starting to bring about more of these characters that don't have to be constricted by what we think of gender, and are far more interestingly maybe coded queer or non-binary, and they're done not for jokes or parodies, they're done for genuine feels. When I look at other animes that contain representation of queer characters, it's actually easier to move away from like the yaoi and the shonen ai shows, and easier to move away from some of the gag anime, the slice of life stuff, and actually look at some really interesting genres. A lot of the time the thriller, sci-fi, mecha genres are much more open to exploring queer coded characters and relationships. You've got the amazing Number 6, which is kind of a sci-fi political thriller, and that has a definite relationship between two boys that becomes romantic. You have Sokyuno Fafner, in which it is so clearly coded that there is a love between these two boys, and it's going beyond sexuality and romanticism. It's that kind of thing in Japan that sometimes love and relationships transcends the physical. So a lot of the times you get characters and you get relationship arcs that end with them kind of being turned into energy. It's basically where Mirage of Blaze went, when the beautiful romantic ending was that one of them became energy and they combined into one being, and therefore they could live together forever because of their love for each other, which in some ways is very beautiful. In some ways you're kind of like, and I just wanted to see the two guys live happily ever after at the end. You see this in things like Sosei no Aquarion, where you didn't know who was going to get together with who, and there was all this kind of interesting like gender and romantic differentiations, and then by the end of it, the three guys combined into a magical soul crystal and had lived happily ever after as a polyamorous soul crystal, I suppose is the best way to put it. But you see it quite a lot when they don't want to put themselves in a hole of this is a definite pairing and they're definitely queer. They get to kind of become more than that. Glass no Kantai is another one where you didn't know where the relationship was going to be. The villain was in love with Michael, but unfortunately Michael no longer existed. It was the sister cross-dressing as Michael, but she was having feelings for the character that she'd been spending this show with to fight back, and in the end they couldn't quite work out who was going to be with who, so magical plane of existence all forming one entity kind of was the way it went. And then you got series like Himitsu the Revelation, in which while the two main characters don't get together in it, so much is steeped in this idea that queer and gay exists in this world, and it's quite a good like sci-fi thriller, and it's got serial killers, and the main character just comes across definitely as gay. Was pretty sure was in love with the last partner, is starting to develop feelings for this new partner. There's even a scene where he's in bed and you see another male showering, then the serial killer is completely in love with him and is murdering beautiful boys to get his attention, and there is a lot of that dynamic. These again are all shows that were never advertised as yaoi and shonen ai, They all shows that don't really fall 100% into shoujo or shonen. They can be enjoyed by both male and female viewers because they are thrillers and sci-fis and mechas. Sometimes I do feel that some things like Himitsu and Number Six may appeal more to girls because of character designs and the fact that so much of the story is based on characters between the two leads and their dynamics and how that pushes forth like the drama as well. But they are beautiful, interesting, they're shows and they're really worth checking out. I do want to talk a little bit about the rise of Yuri. Now, I have always liked Yuri until more recent years where I haven't really connected with it. Back in the day, I would watch everything from Yami Toboshi to Hon no Habito and to beautiful series like Kananduki no Miko, which had, it had action and adventures and mechas and space and priestesses and a genuine relationship forming between the characters. Of recent years, I feel that the Yuri genre is being aimed more towards male audiences than it traditionally used to be for female audiences. So Yuri was another genre like yaoi that came out of a time when people were writing shoujo manga and they wanted to show something a bit different. The first like yaoi was because a female writer was like, we always do beautiful little relationships between boys and girls. What happens if the relationship is between two boys? And then Yuri was much the same, and then it was also written to reflect the school system in Japan and the way they think of girl relationships. But recently, you kind of get it turning into two different things. You kind of get things like Valkyrie Drive and Sin Nanatsu, which, while very entertaining and a bit of a guilty pleasure, are not exactly realistic or positive portrayals of female lesbians. It's just a lot of big-breasted women being very, very sexual. It's so close to the line of being actual hentai, and romance is generally like smooshing your boobs together and awkward close-ups of really tonguey kisses. And then you get the new Yuri stuff, which I feel like has been over-moeified. The characters are looking younger, and they don't appeal to the aesthetic of a woman who wants to see other women interacting. As someone whose great love is Revolutionary Girl Utena, to go from those strong, beautiful women to girls that look a bit too young for me to want to be looking at their romance and watching them make out, because it makes me feel a little bit awkward. I mean, maybe for younger fans it's still quite sweet, but it does seem a little bit heavy on the moe aesthetic, which is designed to pull in more male viewership. My introduction to Yuri was things like Onisama A and Maria-sama Gamitaru, which was both very heavily influenced by the way the school system worked in Japan and something called the S system. And the S system is where young girls come into a school, they are paired off with a senpai, an older classman, and encouraged to form really nice, close bonds with these. If they happen to turn out romantic, brilliant. Be as close as you want to your big sister. Fall in love with her, because if you do that, it means young girls aren't hanging out with boys, aren't getting feelings for them, and don't run the risk of getting pregnant. They don't want their girls getting pregnant, and they don't want their girls having sex, because then they can stay virginal and pure for when they finally have to marry a man and become a housewife and mother. So lesbianism was very much encouraged in this S system, especially in Catholic schools, which is bizarre if you think about it, because it kept girls young, innocent and pure, ready for their husbands who wanted lovely, docile wives and, good mothers. And it's a bit unfortunate. It came out of girls' education and the fact that in Japan girls were originally encouraged to read by reading Western imports such as Little Women that would teach girls how to be good little girls. They particularly liked Victorian literature. It kept their girls lovely and docile and cute and innocent, and how to be a good housewife and a wise mother, which is the Ryusai Kembo way of thinking. But some of them were far more interesting. Onisama E is a bit darker, a bit harsher, and does deal with things like drug addiction and like school pressure. But these were great shows that I really connected with, and just don't connect with some of the newer Yuri that is coming out recently. Then you get that kind of idea of, is something being made for titillation or is something made to be realistic portrayal? There is no doubt that things like Queen's Blade, as much as a guilty pleasure they can be, are made to be titillating. I mean, it's not really hard to see because it's all about attractive hot women smooshing themselves together. It's fun, but it's not realistic. Then you get wonderful dramas like Scum's Wish, which not enough people really talked about, which is a wonderfully deep and dark and interesting romantic drama that also features a lesbian relationship and the whole idea of, am I queer? Am I just in one of these S system relationships? What happens if you start off being like S system relationship and doing it to escape male pressures and then realize that you actually are gay, you actually are a lesbian? When's the line of continuing this because it's fun and experimental, or actually someone might get hurt because these feelings are real and it's just not a made up male concept, and girls can actually have these feelings for each other. I love Scum's Wish. It's really worth checking out. And then you get little gems that no one talks about, like Flip Flappers, which is a lovely action sci-fi kind of magical girl. It's beautifully animated. It has shades of Madoka in it. But there's a definite relationship forming between these two girls because they do express that they love each other in a romantic way. And I think there is potential for it to continue growing in a beautiful way. And I think if more shows had that kind of dynamic, I would much prefer my Yuri to be in this fantasy setting where there's drama and action and just a really beautiful bond being filmed. Flip Flappers is absolutely beautiful, really, really lovely show, and I think more people should definitely check it out. So as I said, I came from a background where things like Revolutionary Girl Utena and Rosa Versailles were some of my earliest animes, and this led to the character type I love and spent half my youth cosplaying. When I wasn't being the male characters from yaoi and like action shows that I really liked, I was cross-dressing as the prince. Now the prince is a byproduct obviously of the S system, and it's that idea of a character that doesn't quite sit, doesn't want to be the girly girl, doesn't want the romantic relationship with the older girl. She wants to be more of a masculine figure, but at the same time knows that she's female, and is normally kind of the one that lots of girls, younger girls, flock around because there's that element of safety that comes from the female prince. That element of, because she's female, she'll understand you, she won't prey on you, she won't get you pregnant, she'll protect and look after you because she's not only the big sister, but she's a prince, and she is dashing and brave and wonderful. Now, obviously, Oscar is a little bit different. Oscar is raised as a boy and was always told that she would be the protector of the royal court, and she struggles with her identity of wanting to do her duty as Oscar, but also the fact that inside there is actually a woman, and sometimes she would like to indulge that femininity, but she's also very strong, powerful, just a wonderful figure. Rosa Versailles is one of those absolutely phenomenal series that everyone should really check out. It's beautiful, and it is a thing that Takarazuka loved to produce for the stage. One day I will get to a Takarazuka. Well, I've been to Takarazuka. I've been outside the theatre. Just so happened that the one time I got to Takarazuka and I was going to buy tickets, the show they were showing was kind of like a more modern drama. It wasn't like fantasy and it wasn't historical, and I was like, oh no, this is not what I want to see. I wanted to see one of these beautiful, fantastical adventures, and I was really upset by that. But I'll get back there again, and I will get there. I love the woman as prince. I love the identity, the strength, even the queer coding, because sometimes they do end up with female partners, sometimes they end up with male, but it doesn't matter because they didn't have to compromise femininity to be strong and masculine, but they didn't have to be 100% strong and masculine to prove that they're also feminine. And it's a wonderful character design, and I hope more animes continue having this female prince characters. So what does this mean for like the future of queer representation? Now, obviously, with the hit that was Yuri on Ice, people went a little bit nuts for it. And I like it. I've got to admit I like it. It's quite a fun sports anime. I do like the characters. There is definitely a queer-coded couple in there. I didn't think it was as obvious as things like Number 6. And I think if people love Yuri on Ice and that relationship, they should go check out some shows like Number 6 and Towards the Terror, Game of La Place, which it's even more obvious that there are queer characters in there that have these relationships. But Yuri on Ice opened the doors for this. And the thing about it, in Japan, the fugoshi and the fudanshi are getting more and more prominent, and these are the female attackers that consume this thing. And the Japanese industry is very interesting because an anime can only be made if the studio pays for it themselves and then sells it to a network. And then they make the money back on DVD sales. So if it's not popular enough to sell DVDs, they A, can't make a sequel, and B, possibly can never make another anime series again because they've bankrupted themselves. So something has to be popular enough. So it means that it has to have enough of the element to appeal to the target audience it's being made for, so they will go out and buy the DVDs, which are expensive in Japan. We're talking like triple the price of a DVD over here. And then they also have to make money off the merchandise. So it doesn't hit that mark. But at the same time, they can't make it too obviously queer because it will alienate other people from watching it that could potentially buy the DVD and obviously upset Japanese sensibilities. It's a weird place it sits. So we're hoping, I think, more queer characters will come out. But instead, Japan, because of a lot of the modification and because of the idol industry that's so big now and has replaced the lost decade as the new big era of anime, we are getting more of these comedies that are using queer-coded characters as humour. You get things like Backstreet Girls, in which it's three Yakuzas that have upset their boss for the last time, so he goes and makes them have gender reassignment surgery so they can become an idol band and make some money back. And it's a pure pun, it's a pure joke, and it doesn't really treat that whole idea of transitioning as anything more than farcical. Then you've got Ore Maho Shoujo, which again, it's young girls that when they get turned into magical girls, get turned into boys. It's, I think, a follow-on from things like Binan, which already had kind of those ideas of magical boys. And I don't particularly like Binan. I don't know why. It just doesn't appeal to me. Ore is far more entertaining, but I think I like it because of how like harsh the violence is when they beat up the demons. The humour, I don't know, maybe I just don't have a good sense of humour, but then I probably watch a lot more sci-fi and thriller than I do comedy. But at least it does address the idea that a male character can fancy another male character. So there is progression there. I mean, I'm hoping that A, they continue making lots of lovely shows that I can still ship. I'm hoping that they kind of move away from the trans character as a joke. I'm not expecting half of these things to ever make canon relationships but in amongst all the stuff that gets popular and mainstream, there are these hidden gems that are definitely worth checking out. But for now, I'm going to sign off because I've been chatting for a while. I hope this was enjoyable and informative. And if it was, then maybe I'll make some more videos like this and put up more information about other animes that are worth checking out that deal with some of these things and put more history in it. I know so much history. I can recommend so many good books about the history of homosexuality in Japan, the coding of bodies. I mean, I've got an entire dissertation on the coding of bodies, but if it's something people want to listen about, I will attempt to do more of these. But for now, you can obviously find me on the Let Zoe Spoil You Instagram. I have Tumblr, Lizzie Loves Anime on Tumblr. I have my Let Zoe Spoil You Twitter account, the Lizzie Ships Anime blog that I'm trying to compile this information in a slightly more acceptable and fun way. But for now, I'm signing off. Bye for now.